ಕಸವ್ರು ಹಾಕೊಂತಲ್ಲ ಲಕ್ಷ್ಮಿ ಹೋಗಿ ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಕು. Good morning, everybody. Nayas, can you see the screen and audible? Nayas, unmute yourself and tell me.
Sir.
Audible and you can see the screen, you know?
Yes, sir. Screen is audible.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Shall I start?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay. Welcome to the subject metal casting and welding. Today, we will discuss the functions of the pattern and the material used for making of pattern and different types of patterns are available. Different types of patterns are available. First, we will discuss the functions of a pattern. Please, all of you, write down functions of a pattern. Functions of a pattern. Functions means what are the work carried out by the pattern. Say the pattern is the replica or positive replica of the casting, which is a little bit larger than the casting required. Say the functions of the pattern, the first point, the main function, the first function of the pattern is to produce the mold cavity in the mold. Whether the mold may be expandable mold or permanent mold or any type of mold. The main function of the pattern to produce the mold cavity in the mold box. Next, establish parting line. This is a very, very important. What is the meaning of a parting line? That is nothing but divide the pattern into two portions. Divide the pattern into two portions. In cope 50%, In drag 50%. You can observe here. You can observe here. This is the parting line. This is the parting line. Upper portion always it is called cope. Bottom portion always it is called drag. Drag. So the establishing parting line between the cope and drag that is created by the pattern. That is 50% of the casting in the cope and 50% of the casting in the drag. 50% in the drag, 50% in the cope. That indicates the establishing the parting line in the mold box. That is also one of the functions of the pattern. Next, promote production of quality casting to incorporate gating system and riser to bring economy to the process. That is, the while keeping the pattern in the mold box, the few allowances and few dimensions are required to cut the flow of liquid metal and establish the runner, riser, ingates, and riser. If you keep all the item in proper place and the proper condition, you have good casting. That increases economy of the process. In turn, economy of the process, that is nothing but more productivity. More productivity. Next, the last function of the pattern. Suppose you have a hole in the casting. Suppose you have a hole in the casting. Keep the core like this. All of observe here in the fourth stage. Keep the core like this. Looks like a cylindrical one, which makes the hole in the casting. If you fill the mold cavity with the liquid metal, which surrounds the core and leaves the hole in the casting. That's very, very important to have provision for core print. Core print is the place where you can keep the cores. Where you can keep the cores. Now, please all of you write down one by one. One by one. Number one, first you write down the title, functions of a pattern. Write down the title in uppercase letter, functions of a pattern. Below that, write down number one, to produce the mold cavity, faithfully, to produce the mold cavity faithfully. Next line, write down number two, to establish the parting line. To establish the parting line. Next line, write down number three, to promote production. To promote production of quality casting. Quality casting. Quality casting. Full stop. To incorporate gating system and riser. Gating system and riser. Full stop. To bring economy, to bring economy and productivity, productivity, to bring economy and productivity. Productivity means overall profit or overall economy of the process. Productivity to the process, to bring economy and productivity to the process. Next line, write down. Number 4, to have provision for core prints, to have provision for core prints. So these are the 4 functions of the pattern are very, very important. Next, come to the point. The materials used for patterns. Materials used for the pattern. Say, all of you, please write down in uppercase letter, materials used for patterns. Underline that. First, say, before considering which type of metal or material required for pattern, which depends on the following factors. All of you observe here. Here you have 5 factors which are very, very important before selecting the material for pattern. We will discuss one by one. Subdivision A, number of castings produced. Whether we are producing only 1 casting or 10 casting or 100 casting or 1000 casting or even lakhs of casting. The material or the metal which mainly depends on number of castings produced. Whether it may be 100, 1000 or lakhs of patterns. Next, come to the point. This is also very, very important for consideration of material for the pattern, degree of accuracy and surface finish required. Say, if you want to machine the casting, minimum requirement of machining is hand grinding machine, chiseling operation, and cleaning operation. Say, the surface finish and accuracy of the dimensions on the casting are very, very important. If you provide allowances while carrying out the casting process, from that, if you produce the very, very accurate casting, from that you have overall economy. Economy. The accuracy is mainly depends upon if you keep allowances on the mold cavity, so that if there is no machining operation after the casting process, which increases the profit and productivity and overall economy of the process. For that reason, degree of accuracy is very, very important. As we discussed earlier, surface finish of the casting. Say, by painting the mold cavity, say, different types of paints are available nowadays. Different types of paints are available. From that, you can produce the very good surface finish on the casting, as we call the as cast, ASCAST, as cast. That is nothing but the casting is used in assembly or in machine tool or in the automobile or anywhere. So if you use directly from the foundry, if you use the casting in the assembly directly from the foundry, that is called as cast. The surface finish, if you produce in the casting process itself, which increases the economy of the process. Next, met factor for selection of materials for the pattern, shape and size of the casting, shape and size of the casting. This is very, very important. The shape which you require in the casting, that is the replica of the pattern. So that is also important. And size, say, being a mechanical engineer, in your mind, you have to think the shrinkage allowance. Shrinkage allowance, that is nothing but the volume of the metal in liquid condition is more. Remember, the volume of the metal, whether it is ferrous or non-ferrous, the volume is always more. You may have this question in the competitive examination. The volume of the liquid metal is more or less. See, the volume of the liquid metal is always more. So for that reason, you have to compensate the liquid metal by providing shrinkage allowance in the casting. Shrinkage allowance in the pattern, so that you can compensate the volume contraction. Volume contraction, so that you can compensate the volume in the while pouring the liquid metal, while carrying out the solidification process. Whenever the mold cavity requires the liquid metal that is provided by the riser, then bring the size exactly the size required in the casting. That's so very, very important. The number 3 factor is the shape and size of the casting. Next, come to the point number 4, subdivision D, reusability of pattern, so that they provide repeatable, dimensionally acceptable. That is nothing but reusability. Say, if you use once, then if you throw away the pattern, from that you will not get economy. Once if you use the pattern, you can use it for many more castings for making of the mold cavity. Then you can use the condition reusability. If you make the material with more life, then reusability of pattern exists. So for that reason, the dimensions of the pattern should not change after completion of the mold process. Next, the type of mold material used. See, this is a very, very important type of mold material used. That is clay or resin. All of you heard Foseco, Fosecco, the only company which supplies the resin for foundries for making of the mold. I will show you in the Shantala Ductile and Dry Iron Foundry what all the resins they use. So after completion of this lockdown period, we will visit Shantala Ductile and Dry Iron Foundry. We will see the all the types of molding processes, furnaces, and how they pour the liquid metal into the mold cavity. We will see the process. We will see the process. If possible, you can do some work in the making of mold, and also the mold making machines, squeeze mold, squeeze molding machines, and other types of mold making machines are available. We will visit Shantala Ductile and Dry Iron Foundry and Techno Rings in the industrial estate, Techno Rings, where they use induction furnace for melting. They use the sand casting with binder, clay, and resin. Say the material used, the clay or resin. What is the purpose of clay or resin? That is nothing but bonding of the bonding of the sand particles. Next, type of mold selected: green sand molding or dry sand molding or investment sand process, sorry, investment casting process, etc. This is very, very important. Remember the type of molding process used, that is green sand, comma, dry sand molding, investment molding process, investment molding process, etc. Please, all of you, write down the materials used for pattern. Materials used for pattern. Underline that. Write down the explanation. The materials used for pattern. That few pattern. The factors are very, very important for selection of pattern. Write down before selecting a particular material, comma, a few factors, a few factors are very, very important. Few factors are to be considered. Put a comma, they are, put a colon, write down one by one. Subdivision A, subdivision A, number of castings to be produced. Subdivision A, number of castings to be produced. Subdivision B, subdivision B, degree of accuracy, degree of accuracy, and surface finish of casting, surface finish of casting required, surface finish of casting required. Next line, write down subdivision C, shape and size of the casting, shape and size of the casting. Next line, write down subdivision D, re hyphen usability, re hyphen usability of pattern, reusability of pattern, comma, so that they will provide, so that they will provide a repeatable, they will provide a repeatable, dimensionally acceptable, dimensionally acceptable, dimensionally acceptable dimensionally acceptable. Next line write down. Subdivision E, type of mold material used. Type of mold material used. Hyphen, clay or resin. Clay or resin. We will discuss the resin used for making of mold. Say the formaldehyde solution. Formaldehyde solution. All of you seen the SR synthetic gum. We will call it as SR gum or Fevicol. The company which manufactures the SR gum is Fevicol. Foseco, it is the subsidiary of Fevicol company. It's a multinational company. They manufacture they manufacture the resin for molds. Say, after mixing the resin with the mold in a fraction of a minute, the mold becomes the hard, just like a rock, just like a rock. Fraction of a minute, the mold becomes hard. In a fraction of a minute, the mold becomes hard. If you touch with bare fingers, you feel touching the rock. So that type of resin, usually the resin may be phenol formaldehyde. Phenol formaldehyde. And next line right on F, subdivision F, type of molding selected. Type of molding selected. Hyphen, type of molding selected. Hyphen, dry sand molding. Dry sand molding, comma, green sand molding. Green sand molding, comma, investment molding process. Investment molding process, etc. Investment molding process, etc. Say before going to the next slide. Next slide. Before going to the next slide, we will discuss the factors which are very, very important for materials used for pattern. We will discuss one by one. The number of castings are produced and degree of accuracy and finish required. And next one, the shape and size of the casting, the reusability of the pattern, and the mold material used, whether it is clay or resin. Then last one, the type of molding process selected, that is green sand molding, dry sand molding, or investment molding process. Few question papers already appeared, the factors for material consideration for the pattern. Next, come to the point. Write down the following materials. The following materials used for making of pattern. Making of pattern. Underline the complete sentence. Underline the complete sentence. The following materials are used for making of pattern. Underline the complete sentence. First, subdivision A, wood. Wood. Underline that. Put a colon and hyphen. Put a colon and hyphen. well seasoned tea wood. You write down only this much. Put a colon hyphen. Well seasoned tea wood. So after completion of this module, I will give you the complete notes. In that you have the explanation for the material used for making of pattern. Subdivision A, wood. All of you heard teak wood. Nowadays, for making of furniture and door frame, window frame, all the items we use in our house which are made of teak wood. So this is the costliest wood which is available in the market, and the wood is very very soft. So from that you can produce all the allowances in the pattern that's possible, and also withstand the rough handling and absorb moisture. And sometimes, if the seasoned wood is present, teak wood is present, we do not attract moisture. If it is weak, then only attract moisture. Next, come to the point. Next line, write down subdivision B. Subdivision B, metal. Usually, underline that metal, put a colon hyphen. The metal. If the number of castings more than 10 or more than 100 or more than 1000, then they use metal. Suppose you require only 100 or 10 or less castings, then they go for making of the pattern with the wood. Next, come to the point, metal. Usually, underline that metal, put a on hyphen, aluminium, brass, mild steel, etc. Write down metal, underline that, put a colon hyphen, usually aluminium, brass, and mild steel used for making of the pattern. Only this much you write. Metal, underline that, put a colon hyphen. First, write down aluminium, brass, and mild steel. Next, the very important factor for the pattern made of metal is the life of the pattern is more when it is considered, when it is compared with the wood. And next, you can easily provide the allowances in the metal pattern. And one more thing, the life of the metal pattern is more than the wooden one. And the metal pattern will not attract moisture, and there is no chances of a dimensional change if you use it for longer period. Longer period. Next, come to the point, subdivision C, wax. C, wax, underline that, put a colon hyphen. The wax, the wax made of paraffin, beeswax. In Kannada, we call it as mena. All of you seen the beeswax, Jane mena, beeswax, and the wax used to underline that. Wax, put a colon and hyphen, write down beeswax, paraffin wax, and only wax used for making of the pattern. Usually, the wax is used in investment casting. If you pour the liquid metal into the mold cavity and wax drops downward direction, flows into the hole made in the mold cavity, flows into the downward direction, leaves the mold cavity, and provides the good dimensional accuracy and also dimensional stability in the casting. Usually, this type of pattern is used for making of statues, or making of god and goddesses idols. All of you see the god and goddess idols used in the temple, used in your house. The statues are made of investment casting process. The pattern is made from wax. Next, come to the point, subdivision D, plastics. Underline that, put a colon and hyphen, plastics. Say, different types of plastics are available in the market. When you provide the heat, which becomes liquid, and if you leave it for drying up and solidification in a fraction of minute, it becomes solid. That is called thermosetting resin. Thermosetting resin. Write down the plastic, underline that, put a colon and hyphen. That is the thermosetting resin, put a hyphen, phenolic resin, comma, epoxy resin, foam plastic, etc. Nowadays, all of you see the name board of the shop, name board of the shopping, name board of the shop or business, they're made from the plastic. That is foam plastic. All of you seen white colored 20 millimeter thick boards are available. That is called foam plastic board. Usually they use it for name board of the shop or business establishment. So one thing, this is also very good material for pattern. The weight of this pattern is less when it is compared to wood and metal. But the thing is, which is very soft, very soft. That is the problem. So you can also use the plastic for making of pattern. That mainly depends upon the number of castings produced. Whether you have to produce a 5 casting or 10 casting, you can use for plastic. Next, come to the point, plaster of Paris. All of you seen plaster of Paris used for joining of bones. If any person met with an accident and the hand or leg fractured, then the doctor keep the bones in intact position. They cover the bones with the plaster of Paris and bandage so that in a short period of time, 21 days or 30 days, the bones are joined together and forms the intact joint. The same type of plaster of Paris or gypsum, enter the market name or the brand name is called plaster of Paris. First, it is used in the Paris. For that reason, it is called plaster of Paris, and also it is called as gypsum. Underline that, plaster of Paris. Plaster of Paris. You can produce the castings by using plaster of Paris. You can make the casting by using the plaster of Paris pattern. So that's also possible. See, once again, the 5 types of materials used in making of pattern. First one, wood, metal, wax, plastic, and plaster of Paris. Plaster of Paris. Now, I stop at this stage. Please, all of you, write your name and USN in the chat box. All of you, unmute yourself. All of you, unmute yourself. Answer roll call. Lohit Kumar. Karthik AM.
Yes, sir.
Hemant.
Present, sir.
Pawan HR.
Present, sir.
Abhiram.
Yes, sir.
Malhar Vivekanand.
Present, sir.
Manoj.
Yes, sir.
Shashank.
Yes, sir.
Sushant. Mohan Raj.
Yes, sir.
Najma Khanum.
Yes, sir.
Ganesh,
Yes, sir.
Bhagat Arya,
Yes, sir.
Anush Satish. Don't leave the website. Please stay on the line. I have an important announcement after the attendance. Anush Satish. Anush, Shahid Shahs, Mohammed Shahid, Mohammed Shahid, Hemant KS,
Present, sir.
Karthik MK,
Present, sir.
Pratik S,
Present, sir.
Mohammed Raja,
Present, sir.
Ishan,
Yes, sir.
Nishchit,
Present, sir.
Abhilash, Abhilash, Dhanush,
Yes, sir.
Nayaz Sharif,
Yes, sir.
Krutik,
Yes, sir.
Manoj Hanumantappa, Manoj, Sushant, Karthik R, Akash,
Present, sir. Karthik are present, sir.
okay, Harsha,
Present, sir.
Chetan AB,
Present, sir.
Lohit Kumar, Ganesh Naik,
Present, sir.
Nutan,
Present, sir.
Dhanush, Dhanush,
Yes, sir.
Dhananjay B,
Yes, sir.
Mithun Naik. Now,
Present, sir.
please, anybody else pronounce your name. Please pronounce your name. If you are unable to answer the attendance, pronounce your name. Now, all of you, unmute yourself and promise me by raising your hand. This is the promise note. Because of you are the responsible citizen of Shumaga, responsible student of JNC. Please promise me, raise your hand and tell me. All of you pronounce, tell me. Raise your hand. All of you raise your hand. Unmute yourself. Raise your hand. All of you please unmute yourself. Raise your hand. All of you please unmute yourself and raise your hand.
ಸರ್ ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ತೋರಿಸ್ತೀರಾ ಸರ್?
ಹಂಗೆ ನಾನು ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಟ್ಟಂಗೆ ಹೇಳಿ. ಆಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಯು ನಾನು ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಟ್ಟಂಗೆ ಹೇಳಿ. Please raise your hand and promise me. I will promise that. Promise all of you. I will promise
I will
that.
promise
I will
that.
promise that.
Always I will wear mask.
Always I'll wear mask.
I will not go outside unnecessarily.
I will not go outside unnecessary.
I will maintain.
I will maintain
Social distance of
Social distance.
so I will maintain social distance of
I will
Maintain social distance of
2 meters.
2 meters.
I will help the
I will
I will
I'll
help
help
the
the
JNC.
JNC,
I will help the JNC, Government of Karnataka, Government of Shimoga, and authorities to brings down the. I will help the JNCA. I'll help the government of Karnataka and the authorities of Shimoga to bring the corona,
To bring the
Bring the
corona.
corona.
bring the corona to zero number, zero number,
Zero number.
zero number, zero number. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Now I stop at this stage. I will continue in the next class.